My wife's attorney presented custody papers and said, "Sign full custody to her or these abuse allegations go to the police." I was standing in my own living room when Veronica's attorney dropped the folder on my coffee table. His name was Douglas Finch, and he wore a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Veronica sat on my couch, the couch we'd picked out together 3 years ago, looking at her phone while this man threatened to destroy my life. "Mr. Brennan, these are serious allegations. Physical abuse, emotional manipulation, creating an unsafe environment for your daughter. Sign these custody papers giving your wife full legal and physical custody of Emma, or we file a police report this afternoon." I looked at the papers, then at Veronica, trying to understand what was happening. Our daughter Sophie was 5 years old, and at kindergarten right now, completely unaware that her parents were having this conversation. What allegations? I've never hurt Sophie. I've never hurt anyone. Douglas pulled out his phone and started scrolling. "We have documentation, photographs, witness statements, medical records. Your daughter has shown up to school with bruises on 4 separate occasions in the past 2 months. Veronica finally looked up from her phone. "You don't remember, do you? That's part of the problem. Your anger issues, the way you grab Sophie too hard when you're frustrated, the way you yell at her until she's crying." I felt my chest tighten with panic and confusion. "I don't have anger issues. I've never grabbed Sophie hard enough to bruise her. Who told you this?" Douglas tapped his phone screen. "Sophie's teacher noticed the bruises. She documented them with photographs per school protocol. The school counselor interviewed Sophie, and she confirmed the bruises came from her father." My mind raced through the past 2 months. Sophie had bruises, yes, but she was 5 years old and constantly climbing on playground equipment and jumping off furniture. Kids get bruises. "Can I see the photographs?" Douglas hesitated, then showed me his phone. 3 images of Sophie with small bruises on her upper arms and 1 larger bruise on her thigh. I recognized the thigh bruise. She'd fallen off the monkey bars 2 weeks ago at the park. I'd been there when it happened, had comforted her and bought her ice cream afterward. She fell at the park. I was with her when that happened. Veronica shook her head. "That's what you told everyone, but Sophie told her teacher the truth when you weren't around to intimidate her." The word intimidate hit me hard. I'd never intimidated my daughter in my entire life. I coached her soccer team on Saturday mornings. I read her bedtime stories every night I had her. We made pancakes together on Sunday mornings with chocolate chips arranged in smiley faces. This is insane. I want to talk to Sophie's teacher myself. Douglas closed his folder. "That won't be necessary. The school has, already filed a report with Child Protective Services. They're investigating. But if you sign these papers now, we can tell CPS the situation has been resolved. Sophie will be with her mother full-time where she's safe, and you can have supervised visitation while you work on your issues." Supervised visitation? The words felt unreal. I'd been Sophie's primary parent for the past year since Veronica started working longer hours at her law firm. I did pick up and drop off at school. I made her lunches. I knew her friends' names and her teacher's name and which vegetables she'd actually eat. "I'm not signing anything until I understand what's happening here." Douglas stood up and buttoned his suit jacket. "Then we'll proceed with filing the police report and the CPS investigation. I'll be honest with you, Mr. Brennan. These cases don't look good for fathers. A mother with concerns about abuse, documented evidence, a child's statement to a mandatory reporter. Family court judges take this very seriously." Veronica stood too, slinging her expensive purse over her shoulder. "I'm trying to make this easy for you, Nathan. Sign the papers, get some therapy, and we can work out a visitation schedule once you've dealt with your problems." She walked toward the door, and Douglas followed. I stood there holding the custody papers, my hands shaking. "I don't have problems to deal with. I haven't done anything wrong." Douglas turned at the door. "You have 48 hours to think about it. After that, we file everything with the police and CPS. Your choice." They left, and I collapsed onto the couch, staring at the papers. The allegations were typed up formally. Grabbed daughter's arms with excessive force causing bruising. Yelled at daughter causing emotional distress. Created unsafe environment through anger and physical intimidation. None of it was true. Not one word. My phone was in my hand before I consciously decided to call anyone. My brother answered on the second ring. "Nathan, what's up?" I tried to explain what just happened, but the words came out jumbled and panicked. "Slow down. Start from the beginning." I took a breath and told him everything. The attorney showing up at my house, the abuse allegations, the photographs of Sophie's bruises, the demand that I sign over custody. That's extortion. You can't just threaten someone with false police reports to force custody terms. My brother Liam was a paralegal, not a lawyer, but he knew more about the legal system than I did. "They said they have evidence. Photographs from the school, statements from Sophie, medical documentation." Liam was quiet for a moment. "You need a lawyer immediately. Don't talk to Veronica or her attorney again without representation. And don't sign anything." I looked at the papers on my coffee table. Where do I even start finding a lawyer for this? Liam said he'd make some calls and get back to me within an hour. I sat on my couch staring at my phone, then pulled up my photos. Hundreds of pictures of Sophie. At the park, at the beach, making crafts, playing soccer, covered in frosting from decorating cupcakes. In every single photo, she was smiling. Genuinely happy. My phone rang 40 minutes later. Liam had found someone. Her name is Patricia Donovan. She specializes in family law and false allegations cases. She can see you this afternoon at 3. I checked the time. It was 11 in the morning. I had 4 hours to wait, 4 hours to sit in this house trying to understand why my wife was doing this. Veronica and I had been separated for 3 months. She'd moved out in June, saying she needed space to figure out what she wanted. I'd been hurt, but not surprised. Our marriage had been struggling for over a year. She worked constantly, came home exhausted and irritable, barely spent time with Sophie anymore. When she left, I'd assumed we'd try counseling, work things out slowly. Instead, she'd filed for divorce 2 weeks after moving out. The divorce papers were straightforward: joint custody, split assets down the middle, no alimony requested. I'd signed them without a lawyer because everything seemed fair. Now I understood that had been a setup. She'd waited until I signed the divorce papers before dropping this custody bomb. Patricia Donovan's office was in a building downtown, with her name on a brass plate next to the door. She was in her 50s with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. "Tell me everything that happened today." I went through the whole story again. Douglas Finch showing up, the allegations, the photographs, the 48-hour deadline. Patricia took notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "This is a fairly standard strategy when one parent wants to eliminate the other from the custody arrangement entirely. Make serious allegations, manufacture evidence, create pressure to sign away rights before the other parent can mount a defense." I felt sick. "So, this happens often?" Patricia nodded. "More than it should. The system is designed to protect children, which is good, but that protection can be weaponized. False abuse allegations are incredibly difficult to defend against because family courts operate on a better safe than sorry principle. The burden of proof is much lower than in criminal court." She asked detailed questions about my relationship with Sophie, what our routine was, how much time we spent together, whether I'd ever used physical discipline. "I've never hit Sophie. I've never even spanked her. The bruises in those photographs are from normal kid accidents. She's 5. She falls down constantly." Patricia wrote something on her legal pad. "Did Veronica witness any of these falls? Can she corroborate that the injuries were accidental?" I tried to remember. The monkey bars incident happened on a Wednesday afternoon when I picked Sophie up early from school for a dentist appointment. We'd gone to, the park after. Veronica wasn't there. The other bruises I couldn't even place, specifically. I don't think Veronica was around for most of them. She's barely seen Sophie in the past 3 months, except for her scheduled weekends. Patricia's expression shifted. "How often does Veronica currently have Sophie?" I calculated in my head. "Every other weekend, Friday evening through Sunday evening. She was supposed to have her Wednesday nights too, but she's canceled that almost every week because of work." Patricia wrote more notes. "So you've been primary parent for 3 months, handling all weekday responsibilities, and Veronica sees your daughter approximately 4 days per month." I nodded. "She wanted space to focus on her career. She's trying to make partner at her firm. I understood that meant less time with Sophie temporarily." Patricia looked up at me. "And now she's alleging abuse and demanding full custody after 3 months of minimal involvement in your daughter's life. That's interesting timing." I hadn't thought about it that way. "What does that mean?" Patricia tapped her pen against her pad. "It means this might not actually be about protecting Sophie from abuse. It might be about something else entirely. Money, control, reputation, or eliminating you from the picture so she can make unilateral decisions about your daughter's life." I thought about Veronica's career, her law firm, her ambition. She'd always been driven, but lately it had become consuming. Her firm is old-fashioned, very traditional. The partners are all men, except for one woman who's been there for 30 years. Veronica talks about how they judge working mothers, how she has to prove she can balance everything perfectly. Patricia leaned forward. "Does she have a boyfriend? A new relationship?" I shook my head. "Not that I know of. She said she needed space to work on herself." Patricia made another note. "Here's what we need to do immediately. First, we file a response to any custody motion she submits. Second, we request copies of all evidence she claims to have. Third, we schedule interviews with Sophie's teacher, the school counselor, and anyone else who supposedly witnessed or documented abuse. Fourth, we get character witnesses lined up who can testify to your relationship with Sophie. Fifth, we hire a child psychologist to evaluate Sophie and determine if she's been coached." The word coached hit me hard. "You think Veronica coached Sophie to lie about me?" Patricia's expression was carefully neutral. "I think we need to determine what Sophie actually said versus what adults are claiming she said. 5-year-olds are suggestible. Leading questions can produce unreliable responses. We need to know exactly what happened in that school counselor interview." I left Patricia's office with a plan, but no peace of mind. I picked up Sophie from school at 3:30 like always. She ran to me with her backpack bouncing, excited to show me the painting she'd made. It was a house with stick figures standing outside. She pointed at each one. "That's you, that's me, that's Mommy." The 3 of us together. Not reality anymore, but still her understanding of family. I knelt down to her level. "Sophie, has anyone at school been asking you questions about home, about me or Mommy?" She nodded seriously. Miss Gwen talks to me sometimes. She asks if I'm happy and if anyone is mean to me. Miss Gwen was the school counselor. What do you tell her? Sophie shrugged. I tell her I'm happy. Sometimes I'm sad that Mommy doesn't live with us anymore. My heart broke a little. What else does Miss Gwen ask you? Sophie thought for a moment. She asks about my bruises. I told her I fell at the park and you bought me ice cream after. She wrote it down in her notebook. That was a relief. Sophie had told the truth about the monkey bar's fall. Did Miss Gwen ask if I ever hurt you on purpose? Sophie's face scrunched up in confusion. You don't hurt me. You give me hugs and make funny voices when you read stories. I hugged her then, this small person who I loved more than anything in the world, who had no idea adults were fighting over her future. We drove home and made dinner together. Spaghetti with the sauce she liked and garlic bread. She helped me mix the salad, standing on her step stool at the counter, carefully tearing lettuce leaves. This was our routine. This was normal. How could anyone think I was hurting this child? After dinner, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Mr. Brennan, this is Linda Kowalski. I'm the CPS investigator assigned to your case. My stomach dropped. I didn't know there was a case yet. Linda's voice was professional, but not unkind. A report was filed by Sophie's school this afternoon. I need to schedule a home visit and an interview with you and your daughter. Are you available tomorrow morning? I wanted to say no, wanted to demand more time, but I knew refusing would look worse. What time? We scheduled for 10 in the morning. I'd have to call in sick to work. Linda explained the process. She'd inspect the home environment, interview Sophie separately, interview me, and compile a report for the family court. These investigations typically take 2 to 3 weeks, unless there's immediate danger. I asked what happened if she found immediate danger. Then we removed the child from the home temporarily and placed them with the other parent or a family member while the investigation continues. Sophie would be taken from me and given to Veronica, the exact outcome Veronica wanted. I called Patricia Donovan after Sophie went to bed and told her about the CPS visit. That's expected. They have to investigate once a report is filed. Be cooperative, be honest, and don't volunteer information they don't ask for. I'll send you a list of things to prepare before the visit. Clean home, food in the fridge, Sophie's bedroom neat and safe, all standard stuff you probably already do. I spent the evening cleaning even though the house was already clean. I vacuumed and organized and wiped down counters, desperate for some feeling of control. My phone buzzed with a text from Veronica. I hope you're thinking seriously about what's best for Sophie. This doesn't have to be complicated. I stared at that message, anger building in my chest. She'd created this entire situation, and now she was acting concerned and reasonable. I didn't respond. Patricia had told me not to communicate with Veronica except through lawyers. Another text came through. Sophie needs stability and safety. I can provide that. You need help, Nathan. Please get help. I turned off my phone and went to check on Sophie. She was asleep, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin, her nightlight casting stars across the ceiling. I'd painted those stars myself when we first moved into this house. We'd made a whole evening of it, me on a ladder and Sophie handing me the glow-in-the-dark stickers, both of us laughing when I put one on my forehead by accident. Linda Kowalski arrived at exactly 10 in the morning. She was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with a messenger bag and a tablet. Thank you for making time for this visit, Mr. Brennan. I showed her around the house. Sophie's bedroom with her books organized on shelves and her toys in labeled bins. The kitchen with a full refrigerator and safety locks on the cabinets with cleaning supplies. The bathroom where Sophie's step stool sat by the sink so she could reach to brush her teeth. Linda took notes on her tablet but didn't say much. Then she asked to speak with Sophie alone. I brought Sophie into the living room and explained that Miss Linda wanted to talk to her for a few minutes. Sophie seemed unfazed. She sat on the couch next to Linda and I went into the kitchen where I could hear their voices but not the specific words. The conversation lasted maybe 15 minutes. I heard Sophie laugh twice, which I took as a good sign. When Linda called me back in, Sophie was coloring in her activity book, content. Linda asked me questions for another 30 minutes. About my relationship with Sophie, our daily routine, my work schedule, my parenting philosophy, whether I'd ever used physical discipline. I answered everything honestly. When she asked about the bruises, I explained each one I could remember. The monkey bar's fall, a tumble off her bike, a collision with another kid during soccer practice, normal childhood injuries. Have you ever grabbed Sophie hard enough to leave marks? Linda watched me carefully as she asked. Never intentionally. Sometimes when she's running toward the street or doing something dangerous, I'll grab her arm quickly to stop her, but never hard enough to bruise. Linda made notes. Has Sophie ever expressed fear of you? I shook my head. She's never been afraid of me. She runs to me when she's scared of other things. The interview ended with Linda saying she'd complete her investigation over the next 2 weeks and submit her findings to family court. She didn't tell me what she thought or what she'd observed, just thanked me for my cooperation and left. Patricia called that afternoon. How did the CPS visit go? I described everything I could remember. Patricia listened carefully. The good news is Sophie was comfortable enough to laugh during the interview. That suggests she doesn't associate you with fear or harm. The investigator will note that in her report. I felt a small measure of relief. What happens now? Patricia explained that we needed to act fast. Veronica's attorney gave you 48 hours. That deadline is tomorrow. We need to file our own custody motion before they file their police report. If we're proactive, it shows we're not running from the allegations. We're addressing them through the proper legal channels. She'd drafted a response motion requesting joint custody to continue as outlined in the divorce agreement and demanding a full investigation of the abuse allegations before any custody changes were made. I'm also filing a motion for Sophie's school records and all documentation of the alleged abuse. We have a right to see exactly what evidence they're claiming to have. I signed the papers Patricia sent over via email. That evening, I got a call from Douglas Finch. Mr. Brennan, I wanted to follow up on our conversation from yesterday. Have you had a chance to reconsider? I kept my voice steady. I've hired an attorney. All communication should go through her, Patricia Donovan. There was a pause. That's unfortunate. We were hoping to resolve this amicably. I almost laughed at the word amicably. There's nothing amicable about false allegations and extortion. Douglas's tone changed, became harder. Be very careful about making accusations you can't prove, Mr. Brennan. Defamation is a serious matter. He hung up. I immediately called Patricia and told her about the conversation. She sighed. He's trying to intimidate you. Don't take his calls anymore. Let everything go through me. The next day, Patricia filed our motions with family court. Within 2 hours, Veronica's legal team filed their police report and a motion for emergency custody removal. Patricia had expected this. Now we wait for the court date. Usually takes 2 to 3 weeks to get on the calendar for custody hearings. 2 weeks felt like an eternity. I continued my normal routine with Sophie, trying to keep everything stable and predictable for her. She had no idea that lawyers were fighting over her future or that her mother was claiming I'd hurt her. On Monday afternoon, I got a call from Sophie's teacher, Mrs. Langford. Mr. Brennan, I wanted to reach out because I've been asked to provide a statement for the custody case. My chest tightened. What kind of statement? Mrs. Langford hesitated. About the bruises I documented and my observations of Sophie's behavior, but I feel like there's been a misunderstanding, and I wanted to talk to you directly first. I asked if we could meet in person, and she agreed. We met at a coffee shop near the school after classes ended. Mrs. Langford was in her early 40s, warm and organized, the kind of teacher every parent hopes their kid gets. She ordered tea, and I got coffee neither of us really wanted. Mr. Brennan, I did document bruises on Sophie. It's protocol when we notice any injuries, but I never suspected abuse. Kids fall. They run into things. Sophie's bruises were consistent with normal childhood accidents. I felt relief flood through me. Then why did you tell Veronica's attorney that you suspected abuse? Mrs. Langford looked confused. I didn't. I told the school counselor about the bruises per protocol, and she interviewed Sophie, but I never made any accusations. In fact, I specifically noted in my documentation that Sophie's explanation for each injury was plausible, and that she showed no behavioral signs of abuse. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. Can I record what you just said? My attorney needs to hear this. Mrs. Langford agreed. I recorded her statement clearly. She explained that she'd been teaching for 18 years and had unfortunately seen real abuse cases. Sophie showed none of the signs. No flinching when adults moved suddenly, no regression in behavior, no unexplained injuries, no fear of going home. Sophie talks about you constantly, how you make silly pancakes and do funny voices. She drew a picture last week for Father's Day even though that's not until next year. She wanted to give it to you early because she was so proud of it. Mrs. Langford reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of construction paper. Sophie had drawn us playing soccer together, both stick figures smiling. I had to look away for a moment to compose myself. Thank you for telling me this. Mrs. Langford looked troubled. I received a call from an attorney named Douglas Finch. He said he represented Sophie's mother in a custody case and needed my statement about suspected abuse. I told him the same thing I told you, that I documented injuries per protocol but never suspected abuse. He seemed disappointed. That confirmed what I suspected. Veronica's legal team was trying to build a case out of nothing, twisting routine documentation into evidence of abuse. Mrs. Langford continued. He then asked if I'd be willing to testify that Sophie showed behavioral changes that concerned me. I said no, because that wouldn't be true. Sophie is a happy, well-adjusted child. I thanked her again and sent the recording to Patricia immediately. She called me back within minutes. This is excellent. A mandatory reporter stating clearly that she saw no signs of abuse completely undermines their case. I'm adding Mrs. Langford to our witness list. The preliminary custody hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after the allegations were first made. Patricia prepared me extensively for what to expect. Family court is different from criminal court. The judge has broad discretion and makes decisions based on the best interests of the child. They'll hear both sides, review evidence, and make a temporary custody determination while the full investigation continues. I asked what temporary meant. Usually 60 to 90 days. Then there's another hearing where permanent custody is decided. The hearing was in a courthouse downtown. a building I'd driven past hundreds of times but never entered. Veronica was there with Douglas Finch and another attorney I didn't recognize. She wore a conservative suit and had her hair pulled back. She looked like she was going to a business meeting, not fighting for custody of our daughter. Patricia and I sat at one table, Veronica's legal team at another. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Judge Brennan. Patricia whispered that this was good. Judge Brennan had a reputation for being thorough and skeptical of allegations without solid evidence. Douglas presented their case first. He detailed the documented bruises, presented the photographs from school, and called the school counselor, Miss Gwen, to testify. Miss Gwen took the stand and explained that she'd interviewed Sophie after Mrs. Langford reported the bruises. I asked Sophie how she got the marks on her arms, and she said her daddy held her too tight. My stomach dropped. That was completely different from what Sophie had told me about the monkey bars. Douglas continued his questioning. Did Sophie seem scared when talking about her father? Miss Gwen hesitated. She seemed uncomfortable discussing it. Douglas introduced printouts of text messages between him and Mrs. Langford, highlighting the parts about documented bruises but leaving out the context that Mrs. Langford had provided. He was building a narrative from fragments, making it look damning. Then Patricia stood for cross-examination. Miss Gwen, in your professional experience, how would you characterize Sophie Brennan's overall demeanor and behavior at school? Miss Gwen considered the question. Sophie is outgoing, social, and generally happy. Patricia walked closer to the witness stand. Does she exhibit behavioral signs consistent with abuse? Withdrawal, aggression, fear of adults, reluctance to go home? Miss Gwen shook her head. No, she doesn't show those signs. Patricia pulled out a document. I have your interview notes from your conversation with Sophie. Can you read what Sophie said when you asked her about the bruise on her thigh? Miss Gwen looked at the paper. She said, I fell off the monkey bars, and Daddy got me ice cream because I was crying. Patricia let that hang in the air. And when you asked about the marks on her arms that you described as her daddy holding too tight, what exactly did Sophie say? Miss Gwen read from her notes. She said, Daddy grabbed me when I ran toward the street because a car was coming. Patricia turned to the judge. That's not abuse. That's protection. That's a father preventing his daughter from being hit by a car. Douglas objected, saying Patricia was testifying rather than questioning, but the damage was done. Judge Brennan had heard the full context. Patricia called Mrs. Langford next. She testified about documenting the bruises per protocol, but seeing no signs of abuse. She described Sophie as an energetic child who frequently had minor injuries from normal play. In my 18 years of teaching, I've made 3 CPS reports for suspected abuse. This is not one of those cases. Douglas tried to shake her testimony on cross-examination, but Mrs. Langford was unshakable. She had documentation, she had experience, and she had credibility. Then Patricia called me to testify. I walked to the stand, feeling everyone's eyes on me. Patricia asked me to describe my relationship with Sophie and our daily routine. I explained our mornings getting ready for school, our afternoons with homework and playtime, our evenings with dinner and bedtime stories. Patricia asked about the specific incidents that caused bruises. I described each one I could remember, including the moment I'd grabbed Sophie's arm when she ran toward traffic. I grabbed her hard enough to stop her momentum. She was running full speed toward a busy street. If I hadn't grabbed her, she could have been killed. Patricia showed me the photographs of bruises that Douglas had submitted as evidence. Do these injuries look consistent with your recollection of those incidents? I studied them. Yes. The marks on her upper arm are exactly where I grabbed her to pull her back from the street. The bruise on her thigh is where she fell on the monkey bars. Douglas stood for cross-examination. His first question was aggressive. Mr. Brennan, isn't it true that your marriage fell apart because of your anger issues? Patricia objected immediately. Relevance and assumes facts, not in evidence. Judge Brennan sustained the objection. Douglas tried another angle. How would you characterize your relationship with your wife during the last year of your marriage? I answered honestly. Strained. We were both stressed. Veronica was working long hours trying to make partner. I was handling most of the childcare and household responsibilities. We didn't spend much time together. Douglas pounced. You resented her career success. Patricia objected again. Argumentative. Sustained. Douglas shifted tactics. Mr. Brennan, have you ever raised your voice at your daughter? I thought carefully. I've used a firm tone when she's doing something dangerous. Parents have to set boundaries. Douglas pressed. Have you ever yelled at her? I wanted to say no, but that would be dishonest. I've raised my voice when she's in danger and not listening, when she tried to touch a hot stove, when she ran into the street, situations where immediate compliance is necessary for safety. Douglas looked at the judge. So you admit to yelling at a 5-year-old child? Patricia stood. Objection. Counsel is mischaracterizing testimony. Judge Brennan waved her hand. I'll allow it, but Mr. Finch, get to your point. Douglas stared at me. Isn't it possible that in your stress and resentment you've been physically rough with Sophie without realizing it? I met his eyes. No, I'm aware of my actions. I've never hurt my daughter. Douglas sat down, looking unsatisfied. Patricia called the CPS investigator next. Linda Kowalski testified about her home visit and her interviews with both Sophie and me. The home environment was safe and appropriate. Sophie appeared comfortable and happy. She showed no signs of fear toward her father. Douglas questioned whether one home visit was sufficient to rule out abuse. Linda responded professionally. One visit isn't definitive, but I found no red flags that would indicate ongoing abuse. The child's behavior, the home condition, and the father's cooperation all suggested a healthy parent-child relationship. Judge Brennan asked Linda directly, "In your professional opinion, is this child in danger in her father's care?" Linda considered carefully. "Based on my investigation to date, I don't believe so. The documented injuries appear consistent with normal childhood accidents and appropriate parental protection." The hearing lasted 4 hours. By the end, I was exhausted and emotionally drained. Judge Brennan reviewed her notes and delivered her preliminary ruling. Based on the evidence presented today, I'm not convinced these allegations rise to the level requiring immediate custody changes. However, I'm ordering a full psychological evaluation of the child, conducted by an independent expert, to determine if there's been any emotional or physical harm. In the meantime, the current custody arrangement continues. Joint legal custody, primary physical custody with the father, visitation with the mother every other weekend. Veronica's face went white. Douglas stood immediately. "Your Honor, we believe the child is in danger." Judge Brennan cut him off. "Counsel, I've heard your evidence. It's thin. A handful of bruises with plausible explanations, a mandatory reporter who sees no abuse signs, and a CPS investigator who found no danger. I'm not removing a child from her primary parent based on that. If your psychological evaluation reveals genuine harm, we'll revisit. Until then, my order stands." She banged her gavel, and the hearing was over. Patricia squeezed my shoulder. "That's a good outcome. The burden is back on them to prove their allegations." We left the courtroom, and I saw Veronica in the hallway with Douglas. She looked angry, not relieved or concerned. That struck me as wrong. A mother genuinely worried about her daughter's safety should be devastated that the judge left the child in a potentially dangerous situation. Instead, Veronica looked frustrated, calculating. She saw me watching her, and her expression shifted to something softer, sadder, performing for witnesses. Over the next week, Patricia scheduled the independent psychological evaluation. Dr. Raymond Foster was a child psychologist with 30 years of experience and a reputation for being objective and thorough. He'd spend 3 sessions with Sophie, interview both parents separately, review all documentation, and provide an expert opinion to the court. I met with Dr. Foster first. His office was designed for children, with toys and bright colors, but he interviewed me in a separate room with a desk and diplomas on the walls. He asked about my childhood, my relationship with my parents, my marriage, my parenting style. "Tell me about a time Sophie misbehaved and how you handled it." I thought about last month when Sophie had drawn on the living room wall with permanent marker. I was frustrated because we'd just talked the week before about drawing only on paper. I took the markers away and explained that walls aren't for drawing. She cried and I felt terrible, but I held the boundary. She lost marker privileges for 3 days, then got them back with a reminder about the rules. Dr. Foster made notes. "How did you feel seeing her cry?" I answered honestly. "Guilty. I hate when she's upset. But I also know that boundaries are important. I want her to understand consequences while still feeling loved." Dr. Foster asked about the incidents that led to bruises. I went through each one again, probably the 10th time I'd explained. The monkey bars, the street, the bike fall, the soccer collision. "Do you ever feel overwhelmed by parenting responsibilities?" I nodded. "Sometimes, especially when I'm balancing work and Sophie's schedule and the house. But that's normal parenting stress, not anger or abuse." Dr. Foster's sessions with Sophie were scheduled over 3 days. I wasn't allowed to be present, but I waited in the lobby reading magazines I wasn't absorbing. After the 3rd session, Dr. Foster asked to meet with me briefly. "Sophie is a well-adjusted child with secure attachment to both parents. She exhibits no signs of trauma or abuse. She spoke freely about both you and her mother, mostly positive associations. She did mention that she misses having both parents in the same house, which is expected for a child of divorce." I felt tears threatening. "Did she say she was afraid of me?" Dr. Foster shook his head. "When I asked about feeling safe, she said she feels safest with you because you protect her from scary things. She specifically mentioned the incident where you pulled her away from the street. She said, 'Daddy grabbed me really fast because a car was coming, and he saved me.'" Relief flooded through me. "When will your report be ready?" Dr. Foster said he needed 2 more weeks to compile everything and review all the documentation from school and CPS. "But unofficially, Mr. Brennan, I'm not seeing indicators of abuse. Your daughter is healthy, happy, and bonded to you. Whatever's happening in this custody battle, it's not about protecting a child from harm." Those words sustained me through the next 2 weeks. I kept Sophie's routine stable. We did crafts and played in the backyard and had movie nights with popcorn. She had no idea her future was being decided by psychologists and judges. Veronica called me one evening, ignoring Patricia's instruction that all communication go through lawyers. "Nathan, we need to talk. Just the 2 of us." I almost hung up, but something in her voice stopped me. "What do you want, Veronica?" There was a long pause. I want to drop the custody case, withdraw all the allegations, go back to the joint custody arrangement we agreed on. I sat down, stunned. Why the sudden change? Veronica's voice was tight. Because I made a mistake. Because I listened to bad advice. Because I don't want to hurt Sophie. I didn't believe that last part. Whose advice did you listen to? Another pause. My firm, the partners. They said if I wanted to make partner, I needed to show I could balance work and motherhood perfectly. Having a difficult custody situation where I'm fighting for my child makes me look like a dedicated mother instead of someone who abandoned her family for her career. The truth hit me hard. This had never been about Sophie's safety. It had been about Veronica's professional reputation. You accuse me of abuse to look better at work? Veronica's voice cracked. I know how it sounds, but the partners at my firm are old school. They think working mothers are negligent. I needed to show them I was putting Sophie first, fighting for her, protecting her. I felt anger building. You were willing to destroy my relationship with my daughter and ruin my reputation to impress your bosses? Veronica started crying. I didn't think it through. Douglas said we'd present the allegations, you'd agree to supervised visitation temporarily, I'd look good to the partners, and then we'd quietly go back to normal once I made partner. But you fought back. You hired Patricia. It got bigger than I planned. I wanted to scream at her, but kept my voice level. You made false allegations of child abuse. That doesn't just go away. There's a CPS investigation, a police report, a court case. You can't just take it back because it didn't work out the way you wanted. Veronica was fully crying now. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll tell the judge I made a mistake. I'll withdraw everything. Please, Nathan, let me fix this. I thought about Sophie drawing pictures of our family, about Mrs. Langford's testimony, about Dr. Foster's evaluation. Did you coach Sophie? Did you tell her what to say about me? Veronica went quiet, except for her crying. I asked leading questions. I didn't realize I was doing it at the time, but Douglas reviewed my conversations with Sophie and said I'd basically fed her the responses. I asked things like, does Daddy ever grab you too hard? And, does it scare you? When Daddy yells? She was trying to answer what I wanted to hear. The manipulation went even deeper than I'd thought. You need to tell your attorney you're withdrawing immediately. You need to submit a formal statement to the court explaining that the allegations were false. And you need to apologize to Sophie's teacher and the school counselor for wasting their time and putting them in this position. Veronica agreed to everything. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll fix this. I hung up without saying goodbye. Then I called Patricia and told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. This is good for you and terrible for her. If she admits the allegations were false, she could face consequences for filing a false CPS report and lying to the court. I didn't feel sympathy for Veronica's potential consequences. What do I need to do? Patricia explained that we'd wait for Veronica's formal withdrawal and statement, then file a motion to dismiss all custody proceedings and return to the original divorce agreement. But Nathan, I also think you should consider filing for primary custody yourself. If Veronica was willing to make false abuse allegations for career advancement, she's demonstrated extremely poor judgment. A judge might agree that Sophie is better off primarily with you. I thought about that. Part of me wanted to punish Veronica by taking Sophie away from her completely. But another part remembered that Sophie loved her mother, despite everything. Let me think about it. 2 days later, Douglas filed a motion to withdraw all allegations and dismiss the custody case. Attached was a sworn statement from Veronica admitting she'd made allegations without proper foundation, that she'd asked Sophie leading questions that produced unreliable responses, and that she had no genuine concerns about Sophie's safety with me. The statement went further. It explained that Veronica had been under pressure from her law firm to demonstrate commitment to motherhood while pursuing partnership. She'd made a terrible error in judgment by attempting to use the custody system for professional optics. She apologized to the court, to me, to Sophie's school, and most importantly to Sophie, whose security and trust had been damaged by her mother's manipulation. Patricia forwarded me the filing with a note. This is extremely damaging to her. She's basically confessed to multiple potential crimes. CPS could charge her with filing a false report. The family court could hold her in contempt. Her law firm will likely fire her when this becomes public. I felt a grim satisfaction. Actions had consequences. Veronica had been willing to destroy my life. Now hers was unraveling. But I also felt sad for Sophie, who would grow up knowing her mother had done this. The judge scheduled an emergency hearing to address the withdrawal. Patricia and I sat at our table. Veronica sat alone. Douglas Finch was notably absent. Patricia whispered that Douglas had withdrawn as her attorney, probably to protect his own reputation from being associated with false allegations. Veronica had a new attorney, a younger woman who looked overwhelmed. Judge Brennan read through the withdrawal motion and Veronica's statement. Her expression grew increasingly stern. Ms. Morrison, stand up. Veronica stood, shaking. You've admitted to making false allegations of child abuse, coaching your daughter to provide misleading statements, and manipulating the family court system for professional advancement. Do you understand the severity of what you've done? Veronica's voice was barely audible. Yes, Your Honor, Judge Brennan continued. You've wasted court resources, traumatized your daughter, damaged your ex-husband's reputation, and exploited systems designed to protect children. I'm holding you in contempt of court. You'll pay a fine of $10,000 and perform 200 hours of community service. Additionally, I'm referring your conduct to the state bar for potential disciplinary action. Veronica started crying. Her attorney tried to argue that her client had come forward voluntarily and deserved consideration for that. Judge Brennan cut her off. Your client came forward because she was losing. Dr. Foster's evaluation would have exposed her lies. She withdrew to avoid worse consequences, not out of genuine remorse. The judge turned to me. Mr. Brennan, I'm dismissing all custody proceedings with prejudice, meaning they cannot be refiled. I'm also granting you the right to file for primary custody if you choose. Given Ms. Morrison's demonstrated willingness to manipulate her daughter and the court system, I have serious concerns about her judgment. Patricia stood. Your Honor, my client would like to request one modification to the existing custody agreement. We ask that Ms. Morrison's visitation be supervised for 6 months, with reunification therapy required before returning to overnight visits. Judge Brennan agreed immediately. Granted. Ms. Morrison, you'll have supervised visitation only. 4 hours per week, location and supervisor to be approved by Mr. Brennan's attorney. You'll also attend parenting classes and therapy focused on appropriate boundaries and co-parenting. We'll review in 6 months. The hearing ended. Veronica left quickly, her attorney trailing behind her. I stood in the hallway feeling empty. This wasn't the victory I'd imagined. Sophie would grow up with a mother who'd tried to weaponize her in a custody battle. That damage couldn't be undone. Patricia touched my arm. You should feel good about this outcome. Your reputation is cleared, your custody is secure, and there are consequences for what she did. I nodded, but didn't feel good. I felt exhausted. That evening, I picked up Sophie from school, and we went to her favorite playground. She played on the swings while I pushed her higher and higher, her laughter filling the air. Daddy, will Mommy come to my birthday party? Her birthday was 2 months away. We'd have to figure out how to navigate that with supervised visitation. I don't know, sweetheart. We'll see. Sophie seemed satisfied with that answer. Kids are resilient in ways adults aren't. She didn't need all the details. She just needed to know she was loved and safe. We went home and made dinner together. She told me about her day at school, about the book they read and the game they played at recess. Normal kid stuff, beautiful in its ordinariness. A week later, I got a call from an unknown number. It was a reporter from the local newspaper. Someone had leaked the court documents about Veronica's false allegations. They wanted my comment for a story they were running. I declined and called Patricia immediately. She said there was nothing we could do to stop the story. Court documents were public record. This is going to get ugly. Veronica's law firm will likely fire her. Her reputation is destroyed. I felt a complicated mix of satisfaction and discomfort. I hadn't wanted public humiliation for Veronica. I just wanted to protect my daughter and clear my name. But the consequences were beyond my control now. The article ran 2 days later. It was front page in the local section. Attorney files false abuse allegations in custody battle, judge finds. The article detailed everything. Veronica's confession, the judge's contempt finding, the referral to the state bar. It quoted portions of Judge Brennan's scathing remarks about exploiting child protection systems. By that evening, the story had spread online. Legal blogs picked it up. Parent advocacy groups shared it. Veronica's law firm issued a statement saying they'd terminated her employment. My phone rang constantly, friends calling to check on me, family expressing outrage on my behalf, strangers sending supportive messages through social media. I ignored most of it. I just wanted to move forward. Sophie's supervised visits with Veronica started the following week. I'd hired a social worker named Grace Chen to supervise. They met at a family center with playrooms and observation windows. I watched through one-way glass as Veronica sat with Sophie, playing with dolls and trying to act normal. Sophie was tentative at first, but warmed up. She still loved her mother despite everything. That was the hardest part. I had to support that relationship even though Veronica had tried to destroy mine. Grace's reports were consistently positive. Veronica was appropriate with Sophie. No concerning behavior, no attempts to manipulate or coach. She was genuinely trying to rebuild. After 3 months, Grace recommended that we could consider unsupervised daytime visits. Patricia filed the motion and Judge Brennan agreed, with the caveat that overnight visits wouldn't resume until the full 6 months were complete and therapy showed progress. Veronica called me one evening after a visit. Nathan, I know I have no right to ask anything from you, but I want you to know I'm in therapy. Real therapy, not court-mandated performance. I'm working on understanding why I made such terrible choices. I didn't know what to say to that. Okay. There was a long pause. Sophie told me you're dating someone. I'm glad. You deserve to be happy. That surprised me. I had started seeing someone, a teacher named Lauren, who understood complicated custody situations because she'd been through one herself. Thanks, Veronica continued. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even think I deserve it. but I want you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving to Sophie that I love her and that I made a terrible mistake. I'm not asking for your trust. I know that's gone forever. I'm just asking you to let me be her mother as much as the court allows. I thought about Sophie's drawing of our family, the three of us together. She needed both parents, even if they were broken in different ways. I'm not going to keep Sophie from you unless you give me a reason to, but if you ever try something this again, I'll fight for full custody and I'll win. Veronica's voice cracked. I know. I promise, Nathan. Never again. We hung up, and I sat in the quiet house thinking about trust and betrayal and the impossible task of co-parenting with someone who'd tried to destroy you. Lauren came over later. We'd been dating for 2 months, taking things slow because my life was complicated enough. She brought pizza and we ate while Sophie played upstairs. How are you doing with everything? She asked. I thought about that question. How was I doing? I'd been accused of child abuse, fought a brutal custody battle, watched my ex-wife's life implode, and come out the other side with my daughter safe and my reputation cleared. I'm surviving. Some days that's enough. Lauren squeezed my hand. Some days, that's everything. 6 months after the false allegations, I attended Sophie's kindergarten graduation. She wore a tiny cap and gown and received a certificate for completing the year. Veronica was there, sitting 3 rows behind me. We didn't speak, but we both clapped when Sophie's name was called. After the ceremony, Sophie ran to me first, then to her mother. Veronica knelt down and hugged her, tears in her eyes. I watched them and felt the anger I'd been carrying start to loosen. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe acceptance. This was our reality now. Co-parents who barely spoke, connected only through love for the same child. Judge Brennan had scheduled a 6-month review hearing to determine if unsupervised overnight visits could resume. Dr. Foster evaluated Sophie again and found her doing well, no signs of emotional trauma from the custody battle. He interviewed both parents and reviewed therapy notes. His recommendation was clear. Sophie had a healthy relationship with both parents. Supervised visits were no longer necessary, and a return to standard shared custody would benefit the child. The review hearing was brief. Judge Brennan read Dr. Foster's report and agreed with his recommendations. Ms. Morrison, I'm restoring your overnight visitation rights. Every other weekend, Friday through Sunday. Wednesday dinners, 4 to 8. Holiday schedule to be worked out between both parties. Veronica thanked the judge repeatedly. Judge Brennan held up her hand. Ms. Morrison, you've completed your requirements and shown genuine progress. But understand that I'm watching. Any future manipulation or dishonesty regarding your daughter will result in immediate termination of custody rights. Am I clear? Veronica nodded seriously. Yes, Your Honor. Crystal clear. Sophie's first overnight visit with Veronica since the allegations was a Friday in August. I packed her backpack with clothes and her favorite stuffed animals. She was excited to see her mother's new apartment, which Veronica had decorated specifically for these visits. As I walked Sophie to Veronica's car, my daughter looked up at me. Daddy, are you and Mommy friends now? I thought about how to answer that, honestly, but appropriately. We're working on being good parents together. That's what matters. Sophie seemed satisfied. She hugged me tight, then ran to her mother's car and climbed into her booster seat. Veronica and I made eye contact briefly. She mouthed, "Thank you," and I nodded. They drove away and I went back inside to a quiet house. Lauren was coming over later. We'd plans to watch a movie and order takeout. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe without waiting for the next crisis. My phone buzzed with a text from Liam. How'd the handoff go? I replied that it went fine, that Sophie was happy to see her mother. Liam responded with a thumbs-up emoji and, proud of you, brother. You handled all this with more grace than most people could. I appreciated that. The past year had tested me in ways I'd never imagined, but I'd protected Sophie, cleared my name, and held Veronica accountable. That was enough. A year after the false allegations first surfaced, I sat in Patricia Donovan's office for our final meeting. The custody arrangement was working smoothly. Veronica and I communicated primarily through a co-parenting app that kept everything documented and civil. Sophie was thriving, doing well in first grade, playing soccer and making friends. Patricia closed my file with satisfaction. You're one of the success stories, Nathan. A lot of fathers in your situation lose custody despite being innocent. You fought back effectively and protected your rights. I thanked her for everything she'd done. I couldn't have survived this without you. Patricia smiled. You would have. You're a good father and you had truth on your side. But I'm glad I could help. As I left her office and drove home, I thought about everything that had changed. My marriage was over. My relationship with Veronica was forever altered by her betrayal. But Sophie was safe. I had primary custody, and I'd built a good life for us. That evening, Sophie and I made dinner together. She stood on her step stool mixing salad while I cooked chicken. She chattered about her day, about her friends and her teacher, and the book they were reading. Normal evening conversation. Beautiful, in its simplicity. After dinner, we curled up on the couch to watch a movie. Sophie fell asleep against my shoulder halfway through, her breathing steady and peaceful. I looked down at her and felt overwhelming gratitude that we'd made it through the storm. The custody battle was over, the false allegations were behind us, and every day I got to be this child's father. That was all that mattered. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.